Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Potratz.
And I'm Nathan Hawkins.
We are the Shrink Think Podcast.
Baby.
Enjoy the show. Excellent. I'm going to show off my my swag. I mean, people, I don't want to say it on the podcast, but I guess there are people on YouTube. They can be like, check out this dope shirt. Oh, now it's over there.
Yeah, check out this dope shirt.
Wait, let's do this.
That I got in Silver Dollar City.
Yes. And wait, let's see if we do this one. Boom, even better. Look at that. Yeah, it's cool. From our swag shop. I like it. And they're so comfortable. I got to say, like all the shirts, because I always get like the test ones, right? They're just so comfortable. I love them.
I know.
And like,
I got my first shirt from our actual shop, because you can get them on Canva, you know. Mm-hmm. I got my first shirt from, and I didn't realize I hadn't done that. Mm-hmm. And I got the Fear Make It Your Bitch shirt. We're time to learn on it. You should not have touched it.
I have that shirt too now.
Anyways.
In Army Green.
Did you really get it in Army? No, you didn't.
Yes, I did. I almost wore it this morning.
You did
but
not.
I went with the lion theme.
Did you really do that?
Yeah, I got it. Do you have it in camo green? Or, Army Green?
Don't mess with me.
No, I'm dead serious.
Hate when you do
I'm dead serious.
I hate when you
I'll go home and I'll put it on. I'll take a picture.
I have it in Army Green.
No, that's what I have.
I just don't believe you.
Okay.
Until you show. And you have to come inside of the next, with your shirt. Inside of the next, what is it like? It needs to be within by Monday.
Oh, I'll send it like
because what you'll do
in an hour.
Okay, because I don't want you ordering it.
Look, I have it.
Right.
It'll be delivered in an hour. No, I'll take it in an hour. It's literally sitting on my bed, still folded up.
It's comfortable though.
I know.
It's and not only that, but the print is really good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
Like
it's not like heavy or
no, it doesn't do the thing where like you get sweat
or sticky.
Yeah.
It's not that. No, it's not.
Yeah, I was kind of impressed. I had to find there's like a gajillion different base shirts that you can get, which I did. Anyway, this was like the 64,000 thread count, something like that.
I usually aim for at least 60,000. So when it said 64, I was like, all right, that's good.
Well, the average shirt, for perspective, like if you just go get a shirt somewhere, like that's printed with something that's kind of cheap,
right,
would be 5,000. But
we're not average.
We're not average. We're way more many times whatever it is. Way more.
Right.
I think it's 9 times better. Is that right for that?
It's
more than that.
10, 11, 12 times better. 1, 2, 3.
That's so lame. I'm sorry, YouTube.
Your mom's lame.
Well, we should probably get started.
All right. How do we do this? We do pushing buttons, starting clocks, and action. Hey everyone, welcome to the Shrink Think Podcast. We are thrilled and riveted and excited as always to be here. We're just in general thrilled.
Saving up the excitement.
Riveted and excited. The rest of the week, we're bored. We're like, hello, my name is Nathan. Welcome to counseling. But when we get to Friday, and because it's Friday for us and we're recording for our podcast, we are all of those things excited to be here. We've got a great topic. It's kind of a little bit of a follow-up to the dating topic that we recorded, that came out a little while ago. Dating, the best way to yes is by saying no. And as you were listening to that episode, you wanted to kind of tie it into the longer term, goal that people have, or a lot of people have.
Is that what you're saying?
That you have for people. Yes. Which is, if you're going to date for a long-term relationship and potentially marriage, then you're going to need to know certain information and understand that a long-term relationship, like a marriage, is not something that is static. It evolves over time. and it requires a commitment to that process that maybe people don't quite understand and they need to know. Maybe people do have some understanding of that, but we want to kind of give it some teeth and some clarity so people have a better understanding of what that is and what they're engaging or looking forward into.
Yes. So it matters kind of in some ways how you define marriage, really. Which, go ahead.
Marriage is what brings us together today.
What crap just happened?
Isn't that Princess Bride?
Oh, okay. Okay. I never watched it.
Oh my gosh.
I know, everybody says, like, I can't believe you never watched it.
Today, on this episode, Nathan Hawkins.
I watched pieces of it in grad school.
Loser.
Jeez, Jiminy Cricket. I'll watch it this week.
You gotta watch The Princess Bride. It's a classic.
I'll watch it before you take a picture of your shirt. We'll see. That's you had to watch YouTube more to get that one.
So it depends on how you define marriage.
Yeah, the idea of that, what I'm trying to communicate is marriage being that it's an official thing. You went before some officiant, and you are now legally married, and the end. That's what we're talking about. Okay, we're not. Yeah. Well, what we're not talking about is the idea of like, oh, I just believe in a long-term relationship, and I don't need marriage or a piece of paper to show that. Okay, that's what you're doing. Well, we're not really talking about that. This is not going to totally apply to that, because what I always tell people is that'll come around. They'll be like, not arguing, but if one partner is trying to they want to be married, and the other partner's like, I don't think we need a piece of paper to solidify the commitment. And they'll be like, it's not that big of a deal, and I'll be like, okay, well, it's not that big of a deal, so just do the paper then. Oh, well, you don't want to do it, do you? Well, then it is a big deal, right? So
that's an issue.
That's an issue
that prevents people from being engaged with what we're actually going to talk about today.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha.
So, thinking longer term with marriage and what you do, there's a difference between being committed to the spouse that you have and being committed to the marriage that you have. What I'll tell people that come into counseling that are married is I'll say there's you, and there's the marriage. It is a separate thing.
So like three entities.
It has its own identity. It has its own way of being. And I can give some examples of that if we want to go down that road. But my point is that as you grow and as you're committed, there's an intentionality that you have to have toward the marriage itself. Because you can, and it's both of your marriage. It's one of those things where you could essentially not, this sounds really bad, but you could not have any of the feels, you could not care about your spouse because you're in a fight or you're whatever's going on, and you can still care about your marriage.
So intentionality toward the marriage might be, or especially be something that you need to have, excuse me, you need to have commitment for when you don't necessarily have the feels or the intentionality toward the person. In other words, you might feel like you've lost or might be struggling with the intentionality toward the person. You're like, Nathan, you just get under my skin. I don't have that intentionality. I don't want to try. I don't want to do this for you. But then when I step away, I'm like, well, but I do have intentionality and commitment for the marriage itself. And so I might not be doing it for you, but it's for my marriage.
Right. And that, the thing of it is on the other side of that coin is both people have to have that intentionality. One person cannot simply just carry that indefinitely. However, one person can carry it for a while. That can actually be a thing. You can backpack that, as the younger video game players say.
Giant backpack. Yeah. And I want to clarify too that as we're talking about this marriage, and we'll jump into this, we are also not talking about situations where there's a marriage and there's abuse. There's actual physical, verbal, emotional abuse that's bad, that's wrong, that's very harmful, very damaging. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about cases where there might be like infidelity or serial infidelity. There's just a lot of like broken trust, or even on that note of broken trust, somebody who's like violating the trust in other ways, like addictions or gambling, those kinds of things where real behavioral behaviors are happening that's causing a lot of like damage emotionally and also logistically to the other person. So if there's like alcoholism or drug abuse, those kinds of things, we're not talking about those situations because those are legitimate situations where you might need to take action to not be committed into the marriage because it's literally not safe. So if we put those, and I'm sure there are a bunch of others, we didn't try to cover all of the ground, but just give you an idea that if we move those aside, we're not talking about those cases, okay? So we're talking about kind of your everyday, typical, I mean, people don't realize how common it is to have all of these issues. Communication problems, differences in personality or in preferences, just disagreements, inability to resolve conflicts. Again, that's very normal. And even the Gottmans, well-known relationship experts, John and Julie Gottman from the University of Washington, they say there are a bunch of problems that are unsolvable. And that's totally okay. You just need to come to like a conclusion, a compromise where we can be okay with where this is at. And you might need to continually revisit it. That's very common in relationships. So we're talking about kind of your average everyday relationship, whatever that means. So with that said, if you are going to commit to a long-term marriage, for example, what are some things that people need to know and understand about how a relationship like that is going to look and evolve over time?
Yeah, one thing that maybe to start with that to keep in mind of how things work is relationships are developmental. So there is a natural progression of relationship that starts from one place and then continues on into maturity. And this is true for every single relationship you have, actually, with all your friends, everybody you know.
And I would even say, because I've done this in the context of like groups, there's like how if you form a group, like a team at work, those have a development in the relationship. And also if you're in business, there's a relationship you have with your customers, and those are developmental over time as well.
Right. And so as you are growing, it's if you, excuse me, if you can kind of understand that there's a natural developmental situation, there's also natural developmental stresses that occur that actually work to grow you to maturity, which is why this intentionality that we've kind of been talking about is so important. Because if you don't intentionally stay engaged, regardless of whether or not you honestly might hate your spouse, that completely does happen, then what will happen is you won't manage the pressure of the tension of that developmental space, and you will not grow.
Yeah, and can I even add too, if you resist, if you deny the fact that these evolutions are happening or will happen, then you will essentially be resisting reality. You will be resisting what is and the changes that are happening, and that is going to cause more suffering. You just kind of have to accept that this is a part of life and a part of relationships. They are changing. You are changing, whether you realize it or not, and you need to allow that process to happen and partner with it.
There's some of the study of the Gottmans, actually. We've learned that people can evolve over the course of a 25-year marriage to be essentially 5 different people. And so what ends up happening is you end up having to continually re-accept this person for who they are now. And they're not the person you married, because they really aren't.
It's like you need to continually get reacquainted with this new version, the updated version of this person.
And you might not like them.
And, here's a great example, actually, now that we're talking about this. So I've had an iPhone for years, and I know most of the population has an iPhone, right? So, for example, this has been an ongoing thing between Nathan and I. He loves the iPhone cult, as he calls it. But as a device, it's got an operating system. And that operating system evolves over time, right? Every year there's like a new massive release that happens that updates and upgrades the software that gives it new features, things that it couldn't do before because the hardware wasn't there. In a similar way, you have to kind of get reacquainted with your device and what it's capable of doing. Like, for example, there was a time when way back in the day on our smartphones, where you'd have to send a text, and then if you spelled something wrong or if you said the wrong thing, and there was many like embarrassing stories about this, you had to be like, no, I didn't mean that, and you'd have to send a follow-up text message to say, here's what I actually meant. Well, now, as the software has updated, you can actually long press and hold and then edit that original text to what you actually mean. Instead of like, whatever embarrassing thing you said, you can correct it to what you really meant to say. And so that's a feature that the operating system has done to update itself over time. Well, if you didn't know that, you might still be like sending embarrassing text messages and not realizing it. Well, now you can actually update. So all that's to say, like, you need to get to know your partner over and over and over, because they're going to continually come out with new releases, new versions of themselves.
Well, here's the thing. You when you live life, a lot of you, the fact that you're even listening to this podcast, are growth minded. You want to grow, right? Well, guess what? There's consequences of growth. You're married with another person who's also doing that thing called growing, and then they're changing. And some of that is because you asked them to.
Right.
Right.
And those changes might be unexpected. You might like some of the changes, and other ones are like, I wasn't asking for that.
And you can go through bad times where, stuff that you would have never imagined the person would be into, or they would like, or they would do. I mean, Aaron excluded a lot of the stuff all the big bad things, but there are a lot of other things that are problematic.
Yeah, I went through a phase where I was into Android phones for a little bit and got over that quickly. So I'm out of that bad phase.
Oh, my Atlanta. God help us all. I'm gonna just move on. Okay, so when Apple renders your... Just kidding. So the first phase of development, just kind of jumping into it, is called enmeshment. And where this comes from, where I'm grabbing this material, is from a host of different therapists over Bowen, Bader, and Pearson. These different people, their last names of people, if you looked them up, you would run into them pretty quick. Murray Bowen is the other guy's name. There is, like, when a mom and a baby, so a baby gets born, there's not really a difference between... Mom and baby don't really have any separation at all. I'm talking about really close together, right? Well, the developmentalists that were like looking at how people grow noticed that. Well, it's that, so this, they called it enmeshment, like this unity that ends up happening. Well, as the kid grows up, starts realizing that the kid's by himself, is their own individual piece of a person, and now we've got differentiation.
And he learns how to say no.
Yeah,
no.
That's a little bit longer.
Okay,
it's a little bit farther. Differentiation meaning like I'm different than you. So mom walks out of the room and the kid's still there. Like what's happening? Then the next one we get to is rapprochement, which is, I really hate that they use that word, to be honest.
Rapprochement.
It's a French word.
These are French words. That means...
Rapprochement. No, that it means basically you're taking, like, you're owning what you own. So now you're 2 years old and now you're doing the no, or you're doing mine. Mm-hmm. Mine, right. Mine.
Not yours, mine.
Right. And then
mine.
You get a little older, and now you're like 4 or 5 and you're playing, right? And what you're playing is you might walk in on a 4 or 5 year old and they're playing like house or something, and this is still done, it still happens, and these two kids are like, you're the mom and I'm the dad, and you're the whatever and I'm the other. And what they're doing is they're saying like they're telling their friend or sibling, you are going to do the things that this person does, these roles. Like they might even say like, you're reading the paper, or you're on the internet, or whatever you're doing, and I'm doing this, you're on your phone. And
they're trying to figure out your smartphone.
Yeah. So that's called practicing. They are practicing at doing life, that type of thing. And then the next and last phase is called interdependence. And this is when the kids maybe 6 or 7 and they have an actual job in the house that is needed to be done. So like taking the garbage out. They're supposed to put the garbage all together in one spot. It is something that actually is needed. It does happen. And they are a part of their family core for doing that, right? So the family is interdependent on that happening, and they realize that they are part of it.
And you've placed responsibility intentionally on each other and share that responsibility on purpose so that we can all function together and help each other out for the good of the system.
So that same concept can be taken over time with every single relationship that we're in. So we're going to do that now in marriage. Okay, so you first meet, you're hanging out, and you go through what we call the honeymoon phase, right? Well, that's enmeshment. And one of my funny stories about that is I was doing premarital counseling with somebody, and the lady was an actual seamstress. Like, she literally was making her what are the wedding parties dresses. And I asked them, like, hey, what do you guys have in common, right? And the dude's like, well, we both like to sew. And so I'm like, he said like everything, and we even like to sew. That's it. I'm like, and I knew she's a seamstress. I'm like, so why do you like to sew? And he's like, in 6th grade, I did a cross stitch and I liked it. I'm like, what have you done since then? Well, nothing, but I do like it. Okay. Like, and I left that alone, but that's the vantage point of enmeshment is we are the same. Everything is awesome. That whole thing. And then what happens is you kind of grow down the run and you realize that you're different, right? You now don't have the feels. And this is when breakups can happen. Like, oh, we're just different people. Bye-bye. See you later. But if you overcome that and you realize like you're going to accept the differences in both people, then you end up moving on to the next phase.
And you can realize actually that being different is a good thing, because I've always heard it said that if you're in a relationship where the two of you are the same, then one of you is irrelevant.
Yeah. Exactamundo. So then in rapprochement, and this is where a lot of maturity kind of shows up. You end up realizing, look, I have my opinions and we're different, and I'm not going to change this opinion. Like, this is just simply who I am. And that's when you get if you're going to get a breakup at that phase, it will be because somebody is just not willing to compromise that. They just won't do it. But you also can get really intense fights in that phase and still remain together because you're still maturing and nurturing the marriage, even though you are steadfastly holding to your own guns, so to speak, of your own opinion, which is great. And then the next one will be practicing. And this is where couples will say things like, man, I feel like we're like roommates. We're living as roommates. Like, that's a very common thing to say in this phase of development, because what happens is each of you are so expressing your individuality that you have literally different friendships. You might have friendships that your spouse doesn't even know about, and they don't care. Like, they don't even want to ask, which can make you feel like, what's going on? But that's where this intentionality is. Like, as these phases develop, it takes a different kind of intentionality because it can feel kind of hollow. But you ever sit in a dinner place where you've gone out to dinner with your important person, and you see another couple, and they're sitting at a table, and they just are not talking at all. They're just sitting there, sharing space, existing, and you're like, man, I don't know if that's not good.
Yeah, it can either go one of two ways. It's like, oh wow, like that's a terrible relationship, or oh, look at them, they don't even have to talk. They just can be in the same space together. They're so in love, after 65 years.
Yeah, and the last phase is interdependence, right? So this one is one that typically you don't really find the breakups in. I always try to. Sometimes it's easier to conceptualize these from the context of how the stress fractures. But this one's more like, I think of it like ambassadorship. Okay, so each person's realizing they know like what the faults of the other person are. They totally accept that that's the way it is. They've made that compromise, and they are going to move in that direction with them anyway. And they can articulate it well. Somebody else could even tell them, like, oh, doesn't it bother you to blah, blah? Yeah, it does bother me. And this is how I deal with it, and I'm okay with it. The end.
Yeah, there's a level of acceptance. It's kind of like in those first stages, you haven't really accepted. You're like wrestling with, resisting, fighting with the truth about the other person, about how it is with you. And then over time, the hope is that as you work through it, you've developed some acceptance for it, which doesn't mean that it's changed. It doesn't mean that you always like it. It just means that I've accepted that it's part of the person or part of our relationship. And assuming, again, going back to the beginning, that it's not a bad thing. It might be a quirk. It might be a habit. It might be a preference or whatever, but we've just accepted that it is, and that's part of you.
So how it's important to consider that to some extent the flow of this is a bit like a washing machine. And I say that because you could actually be in a different phase of development than your partner is. It's totally possible for you to be in rapprochement and them to be in practicing or something else. But here's the commonality that you have to focus on. We've been talking about that intentionality. The lubricant of all of the relationship growth is through enmeshment. What I tell people that come in as couples counseling, 100% of the time, the reason why they are there is because they cannot figure out how to re-enmesh. They can't figure out how to reconnect to the secret sauce of their partner. And they probably have been trying. And usually the way that people are trying is they're more self-focused than other-focused. They're trying to draw their person in
to themselves.
To themselves about like, I need this from you type of a thing by telling them what to do rather than trying to understand what the other person is needed. Enmeshment, some of you are not going to feel like doing that different times. Each, different partners that'll be the thing. But just know that's what keeps things going. That's the stupid stuff. That's sex. That's dumb fart jokes. That's like the stuff that seems to not matter. It's the inside jokes, that kind of thing. And that's good. Like, it's not immature to re-enmesh. That's what keeps you going. So there's definitely a lot more in relationship to talk about. We wanted to kind of give you the broad, kind of spread shotgun approach of like, okay, this is development. This is where we're at. I know I'm gone a little bit long. For those of you that care. There's people that want us to keep going. I get that a lot. So now you've got a little bit more minutes of us. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess just in closure, because you put a lot out there are these different stages, and what it sounds like you're saying is you have to engage them differently and stay committed overall, but engage them differently so that you can work through kind of the different requirements, the different needs, the different challenges of the different stages in order to stay committed to the marriage itself.
Yes. And then the reason I wanted to show you or talk about the developmental nature is because I think it also provides a little bit of safety and hope to know like, oh, you are growing. Like, and actually there's people that have studied this and you're growing in a direction and it keeps going like that. The book is not cheap, by the way. It is a graduate level book, but it's called In Quest of the Mythical Mate by Bader and Pearson. They go into details of all the different ways that this stuff overlaps. But, we hope that you stay committed. We hope that you take your marriage seriously. And we hope that we've helped in the aiming for maturity in your relationships.
And we hope that you have a great day.
Boom.